Didn't see any videos on how to make yuca bread. And I reckon that if it's like potato bread, it should be the same. Plot twist, it really was. This is how it turned out. You can see it's nice and golden and it was really soft inside. Let me show you how I made it. Yuca is just a root. It's like a potato type of thing. Doesn't taste nothing like potatoes though. They sell it in the frozen section of the ethnic aisle at Walmart. I grew up eating this stuff, and all you really do is you just boil it, and you make sure you remove that little stringy thing that I'm holding. That's called the vein. You remove that because it tastes awful. After you boil it and it's fork tender, cut it up into little chunkies, and this is how much I'm using: 253 grams. I added 2 large white eggs from my chickens. They're roughly around 50 grams each. This is all the butter I had at the time, so this is how much butter I added. So it looks about 3.5 tablespoons. All I did was just, while everything was nice and hot still, I just put it on there into little cubes. They didn't have enough milk of one kind. I just had like half a can of coconut milk, which I wanted to use, and I did. And I ended up topping it off with normal milk. You don't have to do that. You can actually just use normal milk. 1 3/4. Remember, it has to be somewhat lukewarm, so you can microwave it for a little bit. Yeast, it needs sugar to thrive. That's why we haven't added salt yet. I added 30 grams of light brown sugar. Any sugar would work, I am sure. I do not know if stevia or any sugar-free alternative would work, because you're actually banking on the yeast eating the sugar, and I don't know if the yeast will eat that. Other thing to mention is at this point, you might want to blend everything together. I have an immersion blender. They are $10 at Walmart. If not, you can just put it all in a normal blender, and it'll create the forbidden soup. Added 800 flat of flour. You have to use bird flour. It contains a higher gluten content. You can't just use all-purpose flour. But if somebody does it with all-purpose flour, let me know how that goes, because when I've baked with it before, it turns out awful. Around a yeast, but this is the one that I actually used, the rapid rice yeast. It's strong, it's aggressive, and it works really well. I have other yeasts, but this is actually much better in my personal opinion. You're then adding salt. I added about 22 grams. I would have probably added about 30, maybe 35, because when I split it between 2 loaves, it just wasn't really as salty as I prefer it. But no, it doesn't matter, because you have salt and yeast. It doesn't matter, I promise you. That yeast is aggressive enough where 22 grams of salt in a 900-gram concoction, it won't matter. Now, I'll have a quarrel when people say no need. Yeah, but we didn't really need this at all. So this is what the dough should look like if you just keep spinning it around with one of the wooden spoons from the kitchen. You can see it looks awful. At one point, the spoon just wasn't enough, so I had to get dirty. Kind of just boop, boop, boop. But notice the consistency of the dough. You see how it doesn't look right? It doesn't have to, because while the items are all hydrating and stuff like that, it'll look like this. But wait, I let her stay covered, right, with a little lid for the big bowl for maybe about 15 minutes. And look at the texture of the dough, how it's already hydrated and changed. At this point, I give it a few more pats, and I spray it with some cooking oil, olive oil if you have it, whatever, it doesn't matter. About an hour, 2 hours later, you can see that it's pretty big, and we haven't even touched it. You can see the bubbles of the yeast and everything, so we know it is active. You can definitely not touch this and start baking right away. One of the really good ways of telling is you'll go and put your finger and poke it, and you'll leave a little divot, and the divot should rise back up, and then it's ready to bake. But personally, I like more of a fermented flavor, so, well, I got busy. Forgot about it. This is hour like 8, and yeah. My idea was to actually bake it in the morning, and or after I got home from work, which is usually around 1 p.m., so just overnight rice type of thing. Yeah, I got home around 4 o'clock p.m., and yeah, it did this. But you can see all this. So what you do now, you just scrape it down the side of the bowl and fold it onto itself a few times. It will not be sticky at all. I have the infamous Walmart lasagna pans. We don't have bread pans here, so what I did is I divided them evenly and oiled up the surface with the oil sprayer. Lightly or heavily floured surface, my trusty dusty wooden board, and I just split it perfectly in half. You can see all that gluten development, and all I did was roll it flat with my hands and roll it like a little cinnamon roll. It ain't rocket science. You could really just take a wine bottle and roll it out, and you gently just kind of roll it about the same length of the pan, but you will create a seam. That seam, you just pinch it, boop, 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 and you put it into the loaf. You bake at 375 for 25 to 35 minutes. Now here's the key. There's no exact science of this, because there's a lot of variations in flour conditions, what kind of oven you have. Preferably you're using a big oven. You want a golden color on the outside. And yes, if you think you're about to burn it, don't even worry, you're not burning anything. You want a golden color on the outside, and or you can just put a toothpick in there and it should feel like you're poking bread. I'm not a fake baker, so I'll show you that. My nice crumbage. And that's sandwich bread made out of Yuca. Honorable tips. Do not cut into the bread hot. It is still actually cooking all the way through. If you cut into it while it's hot, it can actually just kind of either collapse or not cook all the way through, or just crumble out, which not what you want at all. You want to flip them out of their little pans maybe 10-15 minutes after I come out of the oven and put them on a little wire rack, which you can see out here. Check on a picture, right? Oh, you can actually kind of see it right there. Because if you just leave it on a flat surface, the bottom is going to get soggy. Eat my cute eggs from my chickens. This bread tastes even better, maybe, hear me out, a day or two after you made it. Don't touch it, just leave it there. Store it in a paper bag if you have them. I'm sure there's an Aldi near you that sells paper bags. Ideally, this process can actually be done in about 2 to 3 hours. So if somebody's at your house and says, hey, I'm craving bread, yeah, you can have it done in 3 hours. I just forgot about it overnight, and that happened. Especially with that rapid rice yeast, it'll be ready very quickly. Don't worry, I'm going to make better videos. I'm actually boiling up potato right now so I can make potato bread in a smaller scale, so you don't have 2 loaves, you have 1. When you're scaling down, baking doesn't always work, so you have to do the trial and error method.